Hi, welcome everyone. It's so great to have you here. The webinar is being recorded. Captions are available if you'd like to turn them on. Please take shared responsibility for impact when you use the chat because everyone's at a different phase in their freelancing career. Put questions in the Q&A and we'll answer at the end. The Institute for Independent Journalists is an education, professional development, and mutual support organization for independent journalists focusing on Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Our mission is financial and emotional sustainability for independent journalists of color through community learning, innovation, and advocacy. Michelle No will be our moderator for this panel. She is a journalist and copywriter living in Berlin. She formerly worked as a staff writer for BuzzFeed and Thrillist and has freelanced for publications including the New York Times, NBC, Apartment Therapy, Serious Eats, and many more.
Thank you so much, Mia, and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here. So before getting started, I just want to share a few quick words on what motivated me to organize this webinar with Catherine and Mia. So in 2019, I moved from New York to Berlin. I moved abroad because I wanted a better quality of life, but I didn't want to give up my career in journalism. Unfortunately, I found few resources on how to be an American journalist abroad. And it took me years to get answers to questions like, what tax form should I sign? At the same time, I met a ton of other writers abroad who had wanted to write for American publications, but had many questions about cultural or logistical barriers. So it's just my hope that this webinar answers many of those questions and helps people plan out their next step in life. So without further ado, I would love to introduce our panelists. So first we have Damaso Reyes. Damaso is the investigative editor at the New York Amsterdam News and has been a freelance journalist since 1996. He has been published by the Associated Press, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the San Francisco Chronicle, New York Magazine, Der Spiegel, and many more. Previous assignments have taken him to countries including Rwanda, Iraq, Indonesia, Tanzania, and throughout the US and Europe. He is a Fulbright specialist and is the recipient of several awards and grants, including Arthur F. Burns and Holbrook Fellowships from the International Center for Journalists, a Knight Luce Fellowship from the USC Annenberg School of Journalism, an Immigration Reporting Fellowship from the French American Foundation, and grants from the Solutions Journalism Network and the Fund for Investigative Journalism. Damaso, thank you so much for joining us. And then we have Itika. Itika Sharma Punit is the deputy editor for Rest of World. She previously oversaw the publication's South Asia coverage. Thank you, Itika, for joining us. And then we have Josh. Josh Rivera is the consumer travel editor for USA Today. He was previously the audience and community editor at the Wall Street Journal and opinion editor at USA Today. Josh has a bachelor's degree in public communications from the University of Puerto Rico and a master's in entertainment business from Full Sail University. He grew up in Bayamon, Puerto Rico. Thanks so much for being here, Josh. And then we have Imani. Imani Bashir has cultivated a body of editorial work centered around the intersectionality of being Black, Muslim, a woman, and an expat. Her purpose is to continuously push for holistic diversity and inclusion that expands beyond trend and cultivates a theme of cultural conversations. She has been featured in publications worldwide, including the New York Times, Glamour, Cosmo, Business Insider, The Washington Post, Metro UK, airline magazines, and many others. Thank you, Imani, and thank you again to everyone for being here. So I would love to start with a question that all the panelists probably get the most, which is, as a journalist based outside the US, how can I best position myself to successfully pitch a US editor? So maybe we can go around sharing a few insights, maybe starting with Imani.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you hear me okay, Michelle?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Because I'm outside, I'm outdoors, getting in the fresh air. But one of the things that I've learned over time in my career, I've lived in 5 countries while being a freelance journalist, and one of the areas in which I shined, the niche bucket that I fit a lot of, was talking about personal stories. The personal essays is really, really a good start, especially if you hit certain intersections. If you're someone who's disabled, if you're someone who isn't like the typical poster person that you typically see in this travel industry, right? Because this is why we're here. And so it's important that your story is told, who you are, how you got to where you are. And in addition, some of the nuances of the places that you're in. And I think it's important that when you're telling those personal narratives, you're not taking away from stories of people who are local to that area or native to that area, right? You're not sucking up all the air. You're giving your depiction of what it's like to be there and be, a person from a different land, a different culture, a different language, and how it is that it's impacting you or impacting your children or impacting your community. So for me, that's always been the area in which, and
Thank you so much, Molly. Maybe Itika, can you share a bit of your perspective?
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Michelle. So I believe, like, from the perspective of an editor who is commissioning, who has been commissioning for some time now, I think the best way to get a yes, or the best way to reach out, is to do your research. I feel like in my books, a good writer is someone who knows who they are pitching to and what they are pitching, to have knowledge about, of course, like Imani said, that you should identify what you want to write about. But when you know that, when you know what you want to write about, you should then sort of try to position it to the right publication, to the right place, to the right editor. Um, as commissioning editors, we are also dependent on freelancers. We are always looking for independent journalists who we can work with, but it has to be the right fit. So in that sense, I feel like several times the mistake that I see independent journalists making is to just blindly writing a pitch and sending it to 50 people. And that doesn't help anybody. I work for a business tech publication, and there are times I get pitches for fashion articles. And that's a waste of my time and your energy. So I feel like doing some research, having some idea about where you think this will fit best, having some idea about which publication does the kind of work that aligns with what you are doing, and then sort of, reaching out to them uh, goes a long way, because then you're not, it saves you from the frustration of, I am pitching and it's not getting approved, etc. um, there are different publications that serve different needs. There is something for everybody. It's just to sort of, find your right fit and position it accordingly and go from there.
Thank you so much. Yeah, definitely quality over quantity. So maybe Josh, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you for having me here today. And just to go off on what Itika was saying, do your research first as to who you're pitching, and also make sure that, because sometimes I get pitches of like the story fully written out already. Don't do that to yourself. Just pitch the idea. If you have a couple graphs or a couple interviews that you've done already, feel free to mention that, because that is a good schematics for the story. But other than that, make sure that you are doing your research as to who you're pitching. And something that Imani was mentioning that I want to touch on is, you're in a place, and let's say you are an expat living somewhere. Doing your research includes that, talking to locals and making sure that your perspective is not the only perspective that you're presenting. If you are part of an underrepresented community, which we commission a lot, or we used to, we're close to submissions right now. But if you are part of one of those communities that we want to highlight, make sure that you have other perspectives. For example, in the disabled community, disabled travelers have a variety and a myriad of needs depending on their specific situation. So it's always good to have just a plethora of different perspectives there. And obviously, as we don't like, I myself don't like when my community gets taken or looked at as a monolith. I'm sure every other community doesn't like to be looked at as monoliths. So do your research as to who is going and pitch the idea. Don't write it beforehand, because that's when you get to work with the editor and see like, hey, maybe we need this, maybe we need that. And it saves time and frustration on your end, because then you're not just shopping around something that's fully written out and you're like, darn it, I can't get this placed. But yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think we'll be going into that in the next question as well. But before we move on, Damaso, can I ask the same question?
So echoing what everybody else said, I think it's true. What I will say is that doing a fair amount of pre-reporting is a good idea, because I just dealt with this with a pitch from somebody who said, oh, I'm going to profile this organization, I'm going to interview these people. And the first question I ask is, has the organization agreed to be profiled? Right? So if you can show your editor or the editor you're pitching that you have interviewed a couple people, you have quotes that you can add. You said these people have agreed to talk to me. In fact, I've already talked to 2 or 3 people. That can help sell your case, right? Because if I'm getting a pitch from someone who I've never worked with before, okay, they have some clips, but can they do the thing that they're claiming that they want to do? I don't want to get down the road with somebody, commission something, and then it turns out, oh, well, I couldn't actually find the people I wanted to talk to and things like that. I think the other side of it is become an expert in something. Could be travel writing, could be business, could be green energy, could be fill in the blank. Or you're an expert in a place, right? Wherever you decide to be or wherever you happen to be, you're the expert. Michelle could be an expert on Berlin. You want to commission her on good places to eat in Berlin, she'll do it. You want to commission her on political, doings in Berlin, she can do it. Like, become an expert in something so that you can go to, if you choose business, you can go to a business publication and say, hey, here are 5 story ideas about business goings on in the country I happen to be in or in the region I happen to be in. I think that picking a lane is very helpful, whether that lane is like a specific topic or a specific place, or sometimes both.
Yeah, so digging a little deeper into that question and sort of, going off of that train of thought, I'm wondering, how can writers leverage their international background to shape their ideas and reporting? Are there parts of being global that can influence a writer's pitches in both good and bad ways? Itika, I know you have some thoughts here. I'm wondering if you can share.
Well, I think Imani mentioned it in her opening remarks about in her answer to the earlier question about being sensitive to the place that you are in. I come from India. I have practiced journalism in India for over 15 years, and from in my part of the world, a lot of times we see expats coming in, whether freelancers or or journalists who are hired by Western publications, sent by Western publications. And we have several times seen stories that are written in ways that don't truly depict the realities on ground. They either lack the nuance, or sometimes they just seem entirely wrong. And I could cite so many examples of this happening. I feel like those situations help me. Those situations motivated me to work at a place like Rest of World, where we are very dedicated to empowering local journalists. So rest of world's model is built in a way that we do have our own journalists in all the regions where we focus on, whether it is Latin America or South Asia or China, for instance, but we also work with local journalists there because there is a certain credibility, there is a certain understanding, there is a certain nuance that people who are from there bring. But that is not to say that if you were moving to another country, you will never be able to crack it. Of course, you will be. But I feel that one must be cognizant to understand that local nuance. One must be open to acknowledge there is difference, or there is what the cultural aspect is, what the, even like, I mean, I deal purely in business and tech stories. And even from that perspective, if you take the example of a platform like Facebook, or WhatsApp. Let's take the example of a WhatsApp. The way someone sitting in New York looks at WhatsApp is very different from the way someone sitting in Nigeria uses WhatsApp, is very different from the way someone sitting in India interacts with WhatsApp. So I feel like if you do not understand that cultural, local business aspect of how that community or that place is engaging with that technology, and you come with your prejudices or your perceptions to it, you will lack the nuance of the story. It's not even something political or cultural. It's actually like, you will just not be able to crack it. I was discussing a story with an African reporter earlier today. He's in Nigeria, and we were talking about WhatsApp, and he said something which I had never heard of as someone who is from India and who's working with an American publication. I was like, hey, that's a story. But I feel like having the pulse on that local use of a technology, having the understanding of the local culture, etc., has its advantages. So if you truly want to be an international journalist, then learn those things. If you truly want to write about that from that place, from that region, you need to be open to learning those things instead of just bringing your learning from home and being like, okay, now I'm going to apply this lens to wherever I go.
Yeah, thank you so much. Josh, I wonder if you have any thoughts here as a travel editor.
Yeah, I'd just like to add just exactly what Itika was saying. You are, as I see it, and the things that as an editor I like seeing is you are a reporter at the end of the day. Unless you're contracted to do a first-person story, you're a reporter. So you need to do the reporting and talk to the people around there, talk to the experts in the local space. And that's what gives you that advantage that we're not there, you are. So take that to the fullest advantage and talk to everybody. Everybody you meet, everybody take notes on everything and make sure that, because you never know what assignment can come up from your own ideas or somebody calling out for pitches. Take notes on every person you meet, on everything, single thing. And so then you can follow up and be like, oh, I remember somebody opened a coffee shop down the street. Oh, I should talk to that person. So make full use of the fact of where you are and who you are, and be a reporter. I think that's one of the greatest things that we have at our disposal, that we are reporters and we can talk to people and we get to ask people all these weird questions and they'll answer. So that's one of my favorite parts. So take advantage of it.
Yeah, it's such a good reminder. So that sort of leads me to my next question, and then we'll move on to other questions not related to pitching. But the one thing I've noted while living abroad is that the tone and style of reporting does differ in different countries. This one is, again, for the editors, but also the writers can answer. I wonder if you can run through, just really quickly, what makes a good pithy pitch, and how can writers make sure they're adapting their style to a publication? And then also importantly, how can writers make sure they're effectively doing so when English is not their first or second, maybe not even their third language?
I can go first on this one, Michelle. So, like I said earlier, read the publication that you want to pitch. All your answers are right there. We are publishing so many stories every day. There is a very high likelihood that any idea that you want to write about, we have done something around that, either from another region or another version, and it is on our website already. So please read that and you will know what our style is. You will know how many sources we speak to for a story, how many elements we have in our story, how the nut graph works, etc. to your point about language, so I was the South Asia editor for Rest of World last year, and I was commissioning stories from India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Nepal, Sri Lanka. All of these countries do not have native English speakers, but my website works in English. I worked with journalists from Bangladesh who could barely string sentences in English together, but they were kick-ass journalists, like, pardon my language, very good journalists, right? Great instinct, great sources, great connections. One of them I remember had like literally cracked the code of writing for a Western publication because he did not sit down to write 3,000 words. He had a format where he wrote an intro, quote 2, quote 1, quote 2, quote 3, quote 4, quote 5, and data 1, data 2, data 3, data 4, and he just sent that. And I understand him. I am from the same region. I wasn't raised in a family where we were speaking in English. It's a language that I have acquired. But his reporting was so solid that I wanted to invest that time in helping him, writing for him or whatever else. And actually, it didn't even take so much time because his reporting was so good. I just had to sort of just string things together, and in 2 hours, the story was done. So I feel like if you're working with good editors, they will understand. Organizations who want journalism from far and wide will understand. They will put in that time to help you with language, etc., if they see your commitment to doing your job. So at Rest of World, our mission is to bring out stories from parts of worlds that are often ignored. And they are ignored for everything, not just for journalism and stories, right? There are no resources of learning language, of education and stuff like that. I have learned in this job in the last year and a half that even the definition of journalism, or like the best practices of how journalism is done, is very different in different countries. Not everyone has the same lessons that like the Western journalists have learned, and it takes time for them. But I'm very happy to invest that time. I'm very happy rewriting, working together when I see that the journalist is very serious about their work and language is their only barrier. I mean, I don't think a good editor will let your language be a shortcoming or impediment for you, or exploit you in any way just because your language is a hurdle. That's all right. I mean, I am also not a native English speaker. I have learned it over the years. I'm still learning it. I still have to sort of, I don't think in English most of the time. So Josh, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm also not a native English speaker, so I recognize that sometimes we do need a little help. But going back to the first part of the question with the pitches, Itika and I are sharing a brain right now because it really is just reading the publication and making sure. Something that I will say is, I think at least with US media, it's very consumer centric. So think about who is the consumer, who is the person at the other end of the screen reading that story. So for USA Today, it's not going to be the same reader that is reading the Wall Street Journal. We could be writing about the exact same thing, two completely different stories. So think about your strengths and how you write as a journalist. Are you more of a business-minded journalist? Are you more of a person-to-person talking type of writer? And that will sort of guide you into which publications are best suited to your talents. And then the other thing I will say is something that would be helpful, and I learned this sort of the hard way because I was obviously doing journalism in Puerto Rico where I grew up. Different cultures have different level of context needed. In the US, because it's so multicultural, it's very low context, meaning that you have to over-explain things. So you have to over-explain what you're doing. In Puerto Rico, it's very high context. So I could say like very shorthand things and people get me. They understand what I'm talking about. Not in the US. In the US, you have to like spell it out a little bit and be like, hey, I'm doing a story, and just bullet it. Be like, hey, I'm doing this, this, and this, and this. And this is what I'm trying to do. That works great. And as long as at the end of the day, you include in that pitch, and it's like, I think your audience who is between this and this, and some stats about the audience that you're trying to reach, you're golden. And don't make them too long. I literally, I spent a day not looking at my email yesterday, and I came back to like 500 things there. So keep that in mind.
Thank you so much. Yeah, the difference between high context and low context, I've actually never thought about it that way, but it's so true. So I wanted to move on to a question directed more at the freelance writers. What are some tips you can give writers who want to build a freelance business with steady/ongoing assignments? And for writers who've yet to move abroad, what are some things they can do to prepare for the big move? And I think we have temporarily lost Imani due to tech issues. So Damaso, this one's all you.
Oh boy. Two big questions. Think about logistics. Use your journalism skills, right? If you want to visit a country to do a story, if you want to move to a country, apply the same sort of awesome research skills that you would to if you were writing a story about a company, right? What visas do you need? What's the cost of living, right? Michelle moved to Berlin because she wanted a better quality of life. And part of that better quality of life, I'm sure, is the housing costs, right? She did her research. Maybe that's talking to someone who's already lives there. Maybe that's doing a lot of reading. But figuring out the logistics, I always say, is the easy part. Like actually getting the motivation to go somewhere or to do something is the harder part. In terms of a steady stream, I think that the best thing that you can do is actually build relationships with publications before you leave. I know it sounds strange, but getting an email from someone who says, hey, I'm going to go somewhere, would you be interested in stories, is different for people for some reason than getting an email from someone saying, hey, I'm here, are you interested in some stories? In theory, you've built relationships as a freelancer locally, regionally, in the United States. So talk to those editors that you have already published you and say, hey, I'm thinking about moving to Berlin, or I'm planning on moving to Berlin. Do you think that company, the magazine or newspaper you work for, the website you work for would be interested? And they say, well, I cover local crime, but I'm best friends with the travel editor. I'm best friends with the international editor. Let me make an introduction for you. And if you don't happen to already have a relationship, again, reach out to people in advance and say, hey, I'm moving here, in 2 months. I'd love to, talk to you about what I might be able to pitch, and then follow up with people once you arrive, once you get there. I think the other thing that's really important, and I think we might talk about this a little bit more, but I want to plant the seed early, is, believe it or not, editors are human beings too. And I didn't used to think that until I became an editor, but editors obviously get a lot of pitches. Be one of the people who reaches out to people, not just when you want something from them. My trick that I used to do when I was a freelancer traveling around is I would send people postcards, physical postcards with a stamp. And I was the only freelancer who ever did that. And, sometimes you would hear from people say, hey, thanks for the postcard. Sometimes you wouldn't. But, one time I visited, an editor's office who would never respond when I sent them a postcard, and on their cubicle wall were all of my postcards. So every day they were looking at my postcards. So, send people an email saying, hey, you guys published that great story. That's really amazing. Don't just get in touch with people when you need something from them, but actually try to develop some kind of relationship. I'm not saying try to be everybody's best friend, but it's always nice to get an email from someone who isn't demanding something of you. And we're in a relationship business. And I've built great relationships overseas with editors who I've never met in person. So it is possible, but you have to sort of try to find ways to stand out, whether that's different ways of staying in touch, whether that's maintaining relationships that you've already built when you move overseas. That's really, really critical, right? Because there may be editors that you've worked with that you don't see on a regular basis, but because you're in the United States, they have a different frame of mind when thinking about you than when you move overseas. So it's really incumbent upon you to try to maintain the relationships you already have and grow new ones.
Thank you so much, Damaso. I have to totally agree with you. And also with regards to maintaining relationships or just refreshing them before you move, that was a huge surprise for me and a huge source of like gigs when I first started freelancing. So I would encourage everyone to do that. Just tell everyone you're freelancing and you'd be surprised how many people need your work. So Damaso, this one's also on you, but I know that fellowships and grants have been a big part of your freelance life. So I'm wondering if you can talk a bit how those have played a role in helping you hit your goals abroad. And also just from an international perspective, talk about how living abroad has helped you even write those applications or, yeah, help you design them.
Yeah. So if I had to depend on the income I made from being published as a freelance journalist overseas, I would have, starved a long time ago. I survived by applying for grants, fellowships, and residencies. That sustained me over the course of about 15 or 20 years as a journalist. And so what's great, especially now, more so than maybe 15 years ago, is there are a lot of grants and fellowships out there for journalists. There are more than I think there ever have been before. And what's great is that if you want to do some kind of weird story or series, or you want to do something that's long form, or you want to do a project that's going to take a lot of time or a lot of traveling, unless you're lucky enough to have a good in at the New York Times Magazine or the New Yorker or National Geographic, no one's going to pay for you to spend 3 months traveling around East Africa doing a story. And whatever they do pay you is probably not going to cover the costs that you spent doing it. What will pay for it is a grant from the Pulitzer Center or a Fulbright, or there are a lot of different opportunities out there for journalists. So spend some time, do some research. If you just type in journalism fellowship, you're going to start getting a lot of resources, and I'll definitely share some in the chat. But one thing I will say is that one thing that's really important, I'll share my screen really briefly, is that when you're applying for fellowships or grant, sort of treat them like you're pitching, right? So this is from 2015, and these are kind of all the things that I applied for, and all the things that are in red are things that I got rejected from. The things in green are the things I got accepted to, or I got that went well. So I applied for like 45 things, and I think I got 3 that year. So it's important not to say, oh, I'm going to apply for a Guggenheim Fellowship, which I've done probably 8 or 9 times, never gotten a Guggenheim, and think, I've written this great application, I'm a shoo-in, let me just kick back and wait for the acceptance letter to show up. Especially if you're doing something that's competitive, if you're doing a grant that's say $10,000 or $15,000 or $20,000, there are probably hundreds of other people applying. So think about the different types of fellowships and grants that may apply to the work that you're doing. I'll give you an example. I wanted to do a story about the spread of Pentecostal Christianity in Europe. I just sort of stumbled upon this story while living in Barcelona. So I applied for a immigration reporting fellowship because I was like, well, a lot of the people who are in these churches are actually immigrants, so I'll apply for that. I got rejected from that fellowship. They didn't accept my application. But then I found that there was a religion reporting fellowship. So I just sort of slightly tweaked my application or my proposal, and I got the religion reporting fellowship, which paid more than the immigration reporting fellowship. And as it turns out, the next year for a different project, I did get the immigration reporting fellowship. So think about the work that you're doing holistically. Think about, and it's not about twisting yourself into pretzels, but it's about thinking about the different angles, the same way that, you might pitch the same story for a travel magazine slightly differently than you would say for a business magazine. It's the same story, it's just looking at it from a different angle.
Thank you so much, Damaso, and thank you for sharing that Google Doc. That's seriously impressive. So first, I just wanted to remind everyone, if you have any questions for any of the panelists, please drop the questions in the Q&A chat. I think there's like a separate chat for Q&A, and then we can get to those at the end of this. So sort of going back to something Damaso said, I wanted to move on to a question that's always plagued me as a freelance writer in Berlin. And this one is really for everyone. What are some ways writers living abroad can connect with editors? And what are things that they can do to maintain a smooth working relationship with someone who has US working hours? So the two-parter, like how can we connect and make that first connection? And then how do we make sure that that relationship is maintained in a way that's working well for both parties? So maybe, Josh, maybe I think you had some thoughts on this.
Yeah, happy to take on that. So I'm speaking from a US media based situation here. Most of us are on Twitter, unfortunately, not the best platform, admittedly, but most of us are there. And so we're sort of like looking at each other, seeing what everybody else is posting, seeing what everybody else is working on. So that's one way to connect with people. As Damaso was saying, it's nice to get comments that are not demanding of something. It's nice if you are just casually being like, oh, great story. Like, I really liked this part, or I really enjoyed this series that you guys are working on. That goes a long way into like keeping that name in top of mind. So when I see you in the inbox, it's almost like, oh, right, it's the person from Twitter. And that stuff kind of works. In terms of scheduling, I've had that happen a couple of times. And what I try to do is, because I also have reporters in Hawaii who are like 6 hours behind me, and I'm in the East Coast. So what I do is I tell my reporter, hey, I have your story. I'm gonna edit it at this time or on this day, because sometimes I have a backlog, and Itika, you can empathize with this. We have a backlog of stories that we have to edit. So just because I got it doesn't mean that I'm editing it right there at that moment. So I usually try to email. It's like, okay, got it. I'll let you know when I'm gonna edit it, and then I'm gonna be like, hey, I'm gonna edit it on Friday in the afternoon. So just be aware that you might be seeing a lot of questions come in around that time, and usually just make yourself available during that time. I'm obviously cognizant of where the person is, so I'm not gonna be like, hey, I'm gonna edit this when it's 2 a.m. in your time. That seems a little excessive. Unless I just leave the questions for you to be like, okay, in the morning, just check them out. And but if it's something that I need for that day, I'll usually let you know, or usually ask the editor, here's the draft. Let me know when you want to edit and when to post, so I can make myself available for edits.
Itika, do you have some thoughts here to share maybe?
Yeah. So I'll actually going back a little bit from what Damaso said. Thank you for saying it. Editors are also humans. So I feel like when you're looking to pitch to editors, Twitter is a great place. LinkedIn is a great place. Most of the websites will have emails of editors mentioned there. I will just after this comment share how to pitch for rest of world, the relevant links of where you can pitch for features, for regular stories from regions. But also when you're pitching, please understand that there is a human on the other end. It's not a bot yet, at least. So it's I mean, just be human in your interaction, sending an email, following up every 15 minutes, morning to night. There are journalists who send 13 pitches in a day, then send 13 follow-up emails to it, have a draft pending that they haven't responded to previous draft, but want another commission. Don't do such things. I mean, we are humans. We also want to commission, and we also want to publish higher volumes, but there's only so much I can process in one day. Give me some time. I will get back to you. We all know what is a decent, rational follow-up time. Follow-up after that. Um, I feel like the best freelancers that I have worked with are people who are like always thinking ahead and very persistent. They are working on a draft, but also thinking about their next story. So they allow me that much time. Like I have a lot of, like, because I've been commissioning from South Asia for a year and a half, I have a lot of freelancers who've become friends now, and I know how they function. So while they are working on a draft, they're already pitching their next story, which allows them to give the editor a 2 week 3 weeks to get back to them. I understand the urgency of getting the work, because I know that freelancers are dependent on every story to earn their income, and there's no monthly salary coming. But it's wiser to plan, and so that your conversation with an editor stays within the realm of rationality and doesn't become 7 follow-ups in a day. So I work very closely with some great freelancers from India, and I know that while they are reporting, they are pitching their next story that allows them 2 to 3 weeks to get that commissioned and then start working on it. And it's not like they wrap up a story and then in panic start reaching out to everybody 5 times a day trying to get that next commission. So please think of your to find connections. Like, all of us are on the web, right? We're all writing for digital publications. So we are on Twitter, we are on LinkedIn, our email IDs are listed on our websites. A lot of websites also have like forms for pitching, I know. You can use those. You can reach out on Twitter DMs, you can reach out on LinkedIn messages, you can reach out on other social media platforms, but also, like, in that outreach, please let's all stay within the realm of rationality and decency, not try and do things that will annoy somebody. That even if it's a good pitch, I will not want to look at it if you've sent me 3 follow-ups in an hour and a half, because I'm exhausted. Like, I mean, that's just too much, right? So if your pitch is good, you will hear back. You want a follow-up, you deserve a follow-up, you deserve a reply, but stay within the realm of rationality is all I can say.
Thank you so much. Yeah, editors are humans too. It's an obvious but honestly necessary reminder sometimes.
I mean, I understand. I'm sorry, I'm cutting you, but I understand the emergency and urgency and need and desire and passion to write. But I have had people coming on my personal Instagram, coming on my daughter's birthday pictures with messages saying, hey, I sent you an email, can you send me a reply? Finding out my personal email ID, my WhatsApp, and sending, like, messages, like one message pasted on all the platforms all at once, like, in email, Twitter, LinkedIn, everything is pinging because this one person has decided to sort of hound me. And that's just, I feel it's unfair. I know I owe you an answer. I will come to you, just give me some time, and don't do this. Like, I don't want to open all the apps on my phone and have you, like, splashed a message across saying, can you reply to my email? I sent an email 5 minutes back. Can you reply to my email?
That only works the backwards. I think once you do that, I'm like, I don't know if I have the mental energy to work with this person again.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot. I'm really curious what that pitch was now that was so urgent. Yeah, so, okay, I think we have time for me to ask maybe 1 or 2 more questions. I did want to talk about finances, because obviously that's such an important consideration for anyone who wants to move abroad, or, it's just thinking of embarking on a freelance career. Damaso, this one's for you. But anyone else also who's lived abroad is open to answering, obviously. So I'm wondering if you can talk about a little bit about some unexpected expenses of living abroad, and maybe what are some important considerations that freelancers should make before moving? And are there any ways that writers can build in some financial cushions there?
That's a great question. I think it's really important to understand where you are in your life. When I was 22, I bought a one-way ticket to Jakarta and had $400 in my pocket and one name and phone number. I would not do that now. I'm in a different place in my life, some 20 odd years later. So think about, what comfort level do you want to live alone? Do you like having roommates? Are you okay with eating ramen most times, or do you want to be able to eat out? I think understanding what your expenses might be is really important. Obviously, doing your research of where you're going. If you're going to move somewhere, save as much as you can. Like, it's going to take time to settle in. If you're shipping things, that costs money, right? So trying to build in that financial cushion so you can get settled. Don't expect to like, oh, I'm gonna move to Berlin and within a month or two, I'm gonna, have a steady stream of freelance gigs, unless you've worked that out in advance. And if you've worked that out in advance, go you're ahead of the game. But if you haven't, if you say, oh, I'm gonna get there and get on the ground, get under my feet and start sussing out stories, it's probably gonna take you a lot longer than you think it is. So save your money as much as you can, but also reach out to people before you go, before you land. Try to build that network. We live in a different world than, in 2001 when I moved to Jakarta, right? There was no Facebook, there was no Twitter, there was no, there was email. That's about it. Now you can, there are local, journalist groups on Twitter, on Facebook, on LinkedIn that you can reach out to and try to become a part of. There are expat groups in every country on Facebook that you can connect to. So I think it's really about trying to, just like if you're doing a story, trying to do as much preparation as you can.
Thank you so much. I also wanted to add that, it might feel a little bit scary to dig in a bunch of money when you move abroad, but for some countries, you make it up, within a year or two. Like for myself, like living in Berlin, I've saved more money in the last 4 years than I have, 7 years in New York. So,
one thing to add is, in your budget, set aside money to go home. You're going to want to visit your friends, your family, and I can't emphasize how important this is. If you're, I'm from New York, going home was a business expense because I would meet with editors. I would go to lunch with people who I had, maybe only talked to online or through the phone, who I had freelance for. Going home often is an opportunity for you to network. I'm a member of the National Association for Black Journalists. Whenever possible, I would try to go to the convention every year, because whether you're NABJ or the Asian American Association or Online News Association, those conventions are, everybody's there, right? It's an opportunity to meet 15 or 20 editors in one place. So yes, you're going to have to pay for your flight and your hotel and the registration costs. But first, it's a tax deduction if you're a freelancer. Second, it's literally get to meet people, and editors are there to meet new reporters, right? It's a target-rich environment, as they say. So you also want to see your family. You don't want to be a ghost to them. So setting aside money to see, go home, see your friends, maintain those connections, but also maintain the business relationships is actually really, really important.
Yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, it's important to your mental health. So I wanted to move on to the Q&A portion, but really quickly, I wanted to ask if any of the speakers have anything else to add, any last thoughts? Okay.
I guess I'll just add, be inventive with your pitches. Check out if we've written, like if we are in a series or we're doing something that we've repeatedly done, we probably have already resources assigned to that, or we have reporters assigned to that. So how can you stand out? What's the missing element to the coverage that you can bring, but is in line with what they do? you know. So be inventive and swing for the fences and have fun with it. If like there's like something that you're passionate about, and that pitch is going to be all the more richer, and you're going to have a lot of fun reporting on that story. So look for something that you're passionate about, and not just because it fits the publication. Look for something that you're passionate about and find the publication that fits what you want to write about.
And definitely don't be afraid to cold email. I remember I moved to Indonesia. I cold emailed someone from Time Asia about a pitch about sailing on traditional boats in Indonesia. And she responded, and they took it and they paid me. And that I lived on that money for probably about 6 months. So it doesn't always work, obviously, but it can work. And you don't know unless you try.
I would also like to maybe, move a little forward from pitching. And once you have gotten a commission, I feel like building trust and keeping deadlines and being in touch is very, very important for you to get repeat commissions from a publication, from an editor. I feel one of the biggest hurdles of working with freelancers is accountability, because a lot of times I work with freelancers who are very excited to get that commission, to sign that contract, and then they do not respond for days. They do not respond to edits. They do not respond in a timely manner. They go MIA. Or I understand that all of us are living lives. We all have hurdles. We all have challenges. There are things that go wrong, etc. But be transparent, keep in touch, communicate. Having that connection, building that connection is going to help you give you a foot in the door to get you repeat business, to get you repeat commissions. So I feel like being trustworthy, building that trust, honoring timelines, honoring messages is very essential too. Because also, eventually it's a small industry and word of mouth travels. And if you continue to do unfair or you keep losing people's trust, it's going to go a long way. The word's going to spread. People are not going to come back to you.
Thank you so much. So I did want to move on to the Q&A because we have some really excellent questions. Okay, I'll just start with this one. So this one maybe is great for the editors. How do you typically transition from being a now and then freelancer to stringer status with a US publication? How typical is that? So I guess, how do you go from being just a one-off writer to being a regular contributor, is how I'm understanding this.
Yeah, I'll just say what Itika was saying, just being such a great partner to the editor. We unfortunately had to close for commissions this year, but I had my ring of my core regular freelancers that I would go back to over and over, because we just had a great working relationship. They knew how to pitch. They knew how to answer quick edits. Everything was fact checked already. That saves us a lot of time. And and also pitching gets easier as you get to know somebody. Sometimes they would just in the same email with edits, they would be like one sentence. It's like, hey, I'm thinking of this. What do you think? And I was like, okay, good, go for it. And then that's another assignment. So just being a good partner, I think that's just goes a long way.
Absolutely. I mean, building trust and relationship, like I was saying, is the best way. You get your first commission, you do a good job. I feel like my favorite freelancers who I work regularly with, the best of them are people who don't let me off the hook. They deliver a story on deadline. They're already pitching the next one, and they're delivering that on deadline, and they're being available. And so I understand that, part of freelance work is the flexibility and the fact that you can travel, you can do different things. But at the same time, this is also work, and it's serious work, and we're working in the business of news, which is timely. A lot of times things are critical, crucial. There is a publishing cycle that I have, right, at my organization that I have to honor. So if you're going to send me a draft and then go for a hike where there's no internet network for 15 days or 5 days, and I'm just trying to reach you, I am going to think 5 times before commissioning you the next time. But at the same time, if you're a reporter who sees that I've started marking edits, proactively goes in, starts solving. So I've had last year several reporters who worked with Rest of World for the first time from South Asia. They became regular contributors. In fact, we recently launched a fellowship. It's starting next week. And some of those freelancers who were regularly writing for us, we considered them for it because they know us, they understand us, they've done substantial. We trust them to deliver good quality. So I think that's how you move forward. And I can tell you as a, like, I should not, I'm not doing this, but I can tell you as industry people, we are also always scouting talent, right? We will have job openings. We are scouting talent. So we are going to tap on people, or we are going to give opportunities to people who have shown commitment to us, whether it is a grant, whether it is a fellowship, whether it is a full-time role, whether it is a next story. So if you show good ethics and like, you do your work well, you will be rewarded for sure.
Yeah, I'll just add, there were two freelancers that when I had an opening, I reached out to both of them. And one of them was like, no, I'm happy freelancing, which is totally fair. And then the other one took me up on it, and she's my reporter right now. And couldn't have been happier because it is a tested, like I already knew how she worked. And I was like, great, I want her on my team.
Thank you so much. Yeah, such good tips. Okay, next question. How realistic is it to basically just pick up my existing freelance business in the US with all American clients and keep it running from a different country? Is there any reason that wouldn't work? So actually, I can answer this briefly, and then Damaso, maybe you can take it. So number one, that could totally work. The only caveat there would be you would need to make sure that with whatever visa you're getting in your new country, it's okay that you don't have local clients. So for example, in Germany, in order to get a freelance visa, I have to prove that there's local interest in my work. And those are letters that I need to submit along with my application. So if you can bypass that logistical hurdle, it's fine. Damaso, I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I would say it's fairly unrealistic. I'm just thinking like, a publication that you're a regular contributor to in the United States and then picking up and moving, to another country or another continent and then just sort of not missing a beat. What are you writing about? Are you just sort of like writing about American business and you can do that anywhere? Then I guess the answer is yeah, you can. You're just a remote worker, and it doesn't matter kind of where you're at. If you're doing some kind of beat reporting, then does that beat translate to where you're going? I guess that becomes the question. All the freelancing I've done has always been kind of endemic to the place I happen to be. So that's my experience. Obviously, if you're doing quizzes for BuzzFeed, for example, you can do that anywhere. And there is reporting that is 100% remote and 100% on Zoom and on the phone, and you can just do that anywhere. I think it really depends on what kind of reporting you're doing. But for me, it's kind of like, if I'm living somewhere, I kind of want to report about the place that I'm living in. I think that's one of the joys of doing international reporting. Now, some people might say, hey, I just want a change of scenery. I want to live on the beach. I want to, take advantage of one of these digital nomad visas. There's nothing wrong with that. If that's what you want to do, it's probably easier to do that, right? If you do pop culture hot takes for an entertainment magazine or a website in the US, you can do that from, St. Bart's or, Saint-Tropez or wherever. But for me, the point of moving somewhere is to immerse myself in the culture and like report from that place. And I think that transition is more challenging. Doesn't mean it can't work, obviously. I think everybody here on this call has had that experience or worked with people who have done exactly that. It's just a little bit different. So I think you really have to think about what kind of journalist you are, what kind of publications you have relationships with, and then does the work that you're doing can you do that from anywhere? Or are you moving someplace because you want to cover something new or cover a new place?
Thank you so much. Yeah, two very different perspectives. Well, not very, but somewhat. So next question, maybe the editors can take this, or really anyone. What is your advice on reporting from a country with limited press freedom? I'd be particularly interested in hearing from someone on the panel who's done this.
I read this question and I thought it was very important. I feel you should always keep your safety and security center, the security and safety of your family. If you are practicing such journalism, or if you are in such a region, you must talk to the publication who you are working with to find out ways in which that they can support you. We work with freelancers in countries where press freedom is limited. And we have a very thorough procedure in place, a safety security training, and the kind of support that we can provide to them. More and more countries are now falling into that category where doing journalism is becoming harder, but you must find support. I know that there are also a lot of not-for-profit organizations that support journalists. You should be in touch with them, but as individuals, we should all keep our safety, security, the safety of our children, of our families, front and center. While we are all passionate journalists, there should be some, you should not risk. And if you're doing a story for an editor, for a publication, you should feel confident to ask them for that kind of a support, because you're putting yourself at risk for them.
Thank you so much for that answer. Anyone else? Or we can also move on to another question. Okay. Let's see. Okay. So this one is, anyone can contribute. It can sometimes be pretty tough for journalists to conduct interviews without the promise or guarantee of a story being published. I personally don't want to invest too much into interviews unless I get confirmation that I'll get compensation for it. What advice do you have for journalists to balance enough pre-reporting before investing too much into it, only to find out the story won't be published? I think that's a waste of time for our sources too. This is a question I hear so often with friends of mine, so I'm very curious what the editors would have to say. And
I have a very one-line answer, because I also ask this question all the time. If you haven't done any pre-reporting, then it is your opinion. It is not a report. It is just something that you were sitting and came up and thought in your head and are wanting to pitch now. So I feel like the pitches that we get at Rest of World are very thorough. We work on our pitches a lot because we're working with new writers every day, and we want clarity on what the reporter understands we need, and we don't want to deal with it when the draft comes in and it's not up to the expectations. So, and I have been a reporter, like for a very long time. I was a reporter. I'm an editor only now. I just feel like if you're not doing any pre-reporting, then it's just an idea that came in your mind, and it's an opinion. Most likely it's not a story. So pre-reporting is essential. Josh, do you have any thoughts on that? Because you said the pitches should be short, which I was like, no, I want longer pitches.
Oh God, we may differ there. We were sharing a brain up until now. I think, at least with myself, I like short to the point, because it is just the sheer volume is way too much for, like, it would take my full work day to like go through my inbox. So that's why I like shorter. That being said, with pre-reporting, I always say, like, as long as you're upfront, and this is like, I like to practice what we all call no surprises journalism, which is, as long as you're very clear with the source and you're like, hey, can we have a conversation? I'm thinking of pitching this story to, I'm thinking of working on this story. This is what I'm trying to pitch at. And keep in mind, this is not the only time you're talking to the source, hopefully. Like you hopefully have time and you go over edits with them, and you talk to this person several times, and then you can show them your clips, same as you would show an editor. You'd be like, hey, I have been published here. I have a good relationship with so-and-so, and I'm hoping to work on this story and work and talk to you about XYZ. And just frame it as a conversation, an exploratory conversation, rather than a full-on interview, I think that lessens the load on both the source and yourself. Because once you say like, I'm interviewing you for a story, that rings alarms on them to protect what they're saying, and on you it puts the onus of like, oh darn, now I really have to get this done because I have a source on the record. So I would just frame it as exploratory conversations. It's like, hey, can we chat a little bit about this? I have this idea, these are my clips, and I'm pretty confident that I can place this.
Thank you so much.
If I could just jump in really quickly, for example, I'm very clear about how I want to be pitched. I'm with Itika. I believe in pre-reporting. I'm a journalist. I'm a curious person. I just want to sit down and talk to people and learn about things. Even if it doesn't make it into a story, you still then become more knowledgeable about what you're doing. I just worked on a 4-part series, labor series, and I interviewed, probably 24 people. Not every interview made it into the story, but I learned a lot more about what I was talking about. It provided me essential context. So I think you can look at pre-reporting as a burden that, oh, I did all this pre-reporting, it didn't pay off, or you can look at it as part of your education as a journalist, and that it might, there are stories that I've sort of worked on pitches on, and then I didn't actually end up getting commissioned for the story until like years later, right? But doing that pre-reporting years before prepared me to apply for that grant or to pitch that story to a magazine later on. So yeah, you have to balance that, right? You don't want to do a bunch of work that's not going to pay off. At the same time, I've had people pitch me things, or I've been on selection committees for fellowship where I'm reading somebody's pitch or application. I'm like, I know more about this topic than they do. And I've been to this place and they haven't, and they're writing stuff which I know is factually inaccurate because they haven't done their homework. So when I get a pitch from somebody or I start talking to a journalist about a potential story, I want them to know more about it than I do. I want them to be able to ask simple questions and get somewhat decent answers. And if you haven't invested the time into it, then how do I know as an editor that you're going to be able to invest the time in it? It's a balancing act for sure, especially as a freelancer. But I would err on the side of see it as investing in yourself when you do pre-reporting, because ultimately, even if it doesn't go into a story right now, it expands your knowledge, which is always a useful thing as a journalist and as a human being.
Yep. Thank you for that insight. So I wanted to ask this other question. I saw 2 questions that sounded a bit similar, so I'm going to ask this one. How do you stay motivated while establishing yourself as a freelancer in a new country while you're still expanding your network and building up your client base? Any words of encouragement for someone considering going freelance? So I think there might be some people in the audience who are thinking of just starting out. So I will shortly answer this, and maybe Damaso, you have some words as well. I think what really helped me was to figure out what my baseline income needed to be in order to literally just survive and feed myself. And that really helped soothe some of my anxieties, especially if you're in a country. In Berlin, cost of living is quite moderate. Groceries are pretty cheap. So it wasn't so absurd. I didn't need so much to get started. The other thing that I will say that I wish I knew earlier on is most freelancers I know find their gigs through other people. And that might feel discouraging, but it's also encouraging because it makes you realize it's not, if you don't have gigs yet, it's not because you're a bad writer or whatever. Maybe you just need to broaden your network a bit. So for me, that's meant really plugging my work in every social media platform out there. LinkedIn, joining Facebook groups, posting something on Instagram, telling friends that I'm asking for or looking for work. And I have found work in the weirdest of places. Like, and it's really showed me, if you know people who have a job, people who are looking for a freelance writer. Like, there's so many companies out there need just straight up a copywriter. So for me, that was a really a solid way to get started. Damaso, do you have any ideas here?
Yeah, I think building a network of support for yourself, whether it's friends, families, other freelancers, people in the community where you move to, is really, really important. Networking, being part of a journalism association, a journalism group, I think is really important, whether that's an ethnic group or something like ONA or IRE, Investigative Reporters and Editors. There are all sorts of Slack groups to be a part of, but I think maybe the most important thing is small victories. Look for the little victories. Don't look, so if I don't get my 5,000 word piece published, then I'm a failure. Like, little victories. Sometimes it's just getting an email answered or beginning a conversation with someone is a victory. Remember, this is all iterative. It's all, you will learn as you go. You will make mistakes. Don't beat yourself up too much about them. And really just try to focus on the things that you're doing well, whether it's like, I learned something new, whether it's like, okay, I pitched, 5 people and one person got back to me and said, well, this isn't the right pitch, but please stay in touch. That's a victory, right? You've established a connection with someone that you didn't have before. So it can get bleak sometimes out there. It can get frustrating. You can get a lot of rejection, but realize that rejection is integral to what we do. Failure is integral to what we do. You cannot do this work and avoid failure or avoid rejection. It is impossible. The earlier you accept that, the better off you're going to be. Not that it doesn't hurt, not that it doesn't sting, but realize that it's part of the journey you're on, and focus on and center yourself on those victories that you will have over time. And also remember, the world does not work on your time schedule. So you might think, oh, 3 months in, 6 months in, I should have X, Y, and Z accomplished. You get to that 6 month and one day and you haven't succeeded the way you planned, doesn't mean you're a failure. It just means it's taking longer than you thought, which happens to most people.
Yep. Thank you so much. So I think we have time for 1 or 2 more questions. So I'm gonna ask this one. What is the best way to branch into a new niche, especially one of the more notable ones like the New York Times or the Washington Post, if you do not have relatable clips? For example, health writing / reporting. So I think this is, maybe a 2-parter question. So what's the best way to branch into a new niche like health writing, and to do it especially for maybe a legacy publication?
I'll take that one first.
Yeah.
I think I was answering some over the chat. Okay, so first thing, like going from one beat to another, I find it's very useful when you can see where they overlap. They're like almost everything we write about is holistic in a way that everything affects everything else. So I'm pretty sure that whatever beat it is that you're in right now overlaps with the one that you want to write in some sort of way. See if you can have that story published and work on that story, so you have a clip that's like, pulling to the other side. And when it comes to like larger publications, personally, I really don't care where your clips come from. Good writing and good reporting comes from anywhere. I really don't care. I know colleagues, however, I'm an outlier. The colleagues do look at publication. But as I said in one of the responses, think of it as stepping stones. You can go from local and use that local clip to pitch to regional, use that regional clip to pitch to national, and build up on I don't even like to call it credibility. I'm super against this whole tier system. So, but it is the system that we're working in, and it is the system that many of my colleagues look at. So working with the system. So try to like build up from there and slowly go forward.
I completely agree with Josh. In fact, I can give you an example. For instance, there is a freelancer in India who writes about the gender and caste issues. And I met her last year just for a catch up and coffee, because she reached out and she said she wanted to talk to me because I'd just joined Rest of World, and we were talking, and she had a lot of connections in the gender and caste sort of community of organizations that represent them and people who are at the front of those kind of movements. And we did a story about one really great feature about the caste problem in India's tech industry. And then 6 months later, she came back with solid reporting on gender issues with tech industry. So we're a tech and business publication, but both the stories were long features. They were 3,000 plus word stories with 30 voices, examples of people who had faced discrimination based on gender or caste at their workplace, in tech industries, in tech companies. So Josh is completely correct. There has to be some overlap. Everything is holistic. You will be able to use your lens or your strength on something else. And also I feel like this, I agree with Josh also on the fact that this pedestal system of what is better, what is worse, it doesn't work for me. I'm okay even if you work with a local newspaper, local media outlet. Your work is good, it speaks for yourself, your idea is good, I would commission to you in a heartbeat, even if you have never written for any of those publications that people consider are superior or whatever.
Thank you again. I think that's all the time we have. I just wanted to thank again all the speakers and also just all the audience members, everyone who's here. This has been an amazing conversation. Please stay in touch, as Damaso just said. And Mia, did you have anything to add to this?
No, thank you so much for joining, everyone.
Okay, then.